2009 and 2012. So we're happy to have Dr. Barina Kirimi as our speaker. Take it away, Barina.
Okay, thank you very much, Ramon. And welcome to all of you who are joining us from different parts of the world. I am honored to be your presenter today, and I hope together we will find ways that we can wake up our yawning boards, but above all to be able to build a vibrant and effective board of trustees. So very briefly, I will just look at the agenda. We want to look at the goals for this webinar. We'll also want to understand what board governance is and why it is necessary. It will be important for us to look at the various roles of the boards and their responsibilities as well as remind ourselves of some of the common board issues and some of the solutions that are possible. We'll also be able to talk about how to establish and maintain a board, as well as how to develop a board, and even better off some of the best board practices that are found. So that gives you an agenda of what we are going to do. Basically, we want to achieve 3 goals. One of them is to understand the value of a board of trustees, looking at what our board of trustees is supposed to do, and as compared to what the management is supposed to do. We'll also be able to look at how to identify and recruit talented board members, as well as getting them engaged and contributing to your ministry without being involved in the day-to-day operations, which is the work of the management. And thirdly, we'll also be able to look at how to maintain a harmonious and healthy board and management relationship. So that should be able to give you a perspective of what we want to achieve. But I want to begin our presentation with an interesting quote that compares board to parents, and simply says that board are like parents. They need to support, encourage, and inspire if the organization is to survive and thrive. So if you are a board member, think of yourself for a moment as a parent to that organization, that your role is simply to be able to support. It is to be able to encourage. But I think I like the idea of inspiring greatness in the organization. But it doesn't end there. It involves looking at how the organization can survive. That means dealing with the current challenges and changes that are happening, but in the long run be able to thrive and fulfill its mission. So it's important to look at the board from that role. So let's ask ourselves a simple question. What does it mean to be in a board, or what is board governance all about? I found this definition that I want to share with you very interesting. And as you will note, is that I've highlighted a couple of words there that we will possibly stick to and talk about, trying to explain what board governance is. So board governance is described as the gathering of 2 or more wise capable leaders who have been entrusted with the role, authority, and relationships to use their power to direct the affairs of the organization ministry or enterprise. When I look at this, I pick out
When I look at this, I pick out a couple of things that,
first of all, for you as a board member,
you have been entrusted with a role
because the organization considers that you
because
have
the
some
organization
system
considers that system
that can help it
that can help it
thrive
to
and to survive.
thrive and to survive.
So wisdom becomes very important.
So wisdom becomes very important.
Secondly, also you realize that
And secondly, also you realize that we are talking about trust.
really of the day,
Really, at the end of the day, the role that you serve in the board is that of trust. And then at the end of the day, it's not just about wisdom and trust.
There is the element of ability. And so you're being given this responsibility because of the ability that you possess. So you're looking at wisdom, you're looking at ability, and you're looking at trust. And that all is supposed to help you fulfill a certain role. It is supposed to help you manage certain relationships. And it's also supposed to help you be able to deal with the directing of the organization. So it's very important that we look at it from that perspective, that the success of any board governance has to do with relationships. You're looking at relationships, for example, among the board members themselves. You're looking at relationships between the board and staff. You're looking at relationship between the staff and the beneficiaries of the organization. So there are various relationships that are involved. At the same time, there has to be communication between these different relationships. And so how that communication is managed significantly affects the quality of governance. We'll also talk about responsibility, because governance is about what you are responsible for. What are you expected to do in a board? What is expected of example? What is the management to support the board and the staff as well? And then the question of authority arises. Who reports to who? Do the staff report to the chairperson of the board? Do they report to the entire board? How are those relationships managed? And is that authority checked to ensure that the organization continues to thrive? And most importantly is accountability. Who is accountable to who? And we can look at it closely from the next slide. And you realize that in a typical Christian organization, we are looking at managing relationships and communications, starting from the bottom of the pyramid, where we are talking about the beneficiaries of the services of that organization. We also talk about the staff, and we are talking about the management. Then you look at the board and what we can easily call as the moral owners. Then we talk about legal authority, because organizations operate within a certain legal environment. So there are certain things that the governments expect depending on where you are registered and what kind of an organization you are. And then for a Christian organization, we believe that there is divine authority. That is not just about what the law expects of us. It's not about what the moral owners expect, but the question of what God expects of us. And if you look at the other side, we're also saying that responsibility and authority comes from top to bottom. So we expect that God has given us a certain mandate. Our mission, our vision is to fulfill a certain mandate, which then goes down to the very last person who are the beneficiaries. And it's the same thing with the authority. We believe that the authority begins with God and ends at the very bottom. And then accountability is upwards. That we expect that at the end of the day, the beneficiaries will be accountable. They will give feedback of the services they receive, and that feedback will flow into the board and into the organizations that as they expected, until we all become accountable to God. And just to illustrate that and possibly show you clearly some of the documents that help us to achieve these various elements of governance. That when we talk about divine authority, we expect that the Bible is the source of our authority. That we believe that God's word will direct us and will guide our decisions and the things that we do. At the same time, when we talk about legal authority, we expect that articles of incorporation, they give us certain guidelines and parameters that help us. So as a board, apart from constantly looking at whether our decisions are meeting the biblical standard, we constantly need to ask ourselves what our articles of incorporation say, what they expect of us, and constantly make sure that we fulfill the requirements. As each organization has a constitution and bylaws, I think as a board it's very important that we familiarize ourselves with these documents, because they help us to know what is expected of us. And we are able to make sure that we meet the expectations of the moral owners of the organization. It's also very important for a board to have a board policies. This is a document that just outlines how the board operates, the relationships within the board, and various policies that are very important to ensure that the board operates smoothly. And at the end, I will talk about some of the policies that are very helpful for the board to look at. It's also important to have a team handbook, especially for the management, especially for the middle-sized and large organizations. It helps very greatly to manage those relationships. And certainly the smart book as well. Some people call it the Human Resources Manual. Comes by different names, but it boils down to the same thing, that there is a better way of everybody knowing what is expected of them and what possibly the consequences of not following the guidelines will be. And so that becomes very helpful in terms of managing relationships. So that in a nutshell is what board governance is all about. It's about managing relationships. It's about communication. It's about responsibility. It's about authority. And it's about accountability. Now, if that is the case, then why is a board of trustees necessary? I want to believe that there could be more than 4 of these reasons, but these reasons really form the basis for us to consider having a board of trustees. That in most cases, it will be a legal requirement if you are registered in a country, there are expectations that you need to have a board, and most organizations have general requirements of what is expected of the board. So you will be fulfilling the law of your various legal jurisdictions. Secondly, I believe it's very important for the efficient running of the organization. When you bring in people with different expertise, people who come in with lots of ability and different experiences, they help you to make decisions that are strategic and that can help you envision the future and some of the challenges that may make it impossible for the organization to fulfill its mission. I also believe that when you have a board, it improves accountability, because it's no longer the issue of one person making all the decisions. There is consultations, and so decisions that are made are basically made because of better consultations, and that means there is accountability. Accountability to the government, accountability to the beneficiaries of the organization, accountability to staff, especially when you have to make difficult decisions. Then at least everybody can be assured that the decision was the best that was to be made. But even above all is that having a board of trustees reduces risks for organizations, because different people bring in different mindsets that help them to see the risks that are potential to the organization. So take a moment and ask yourself this question. Looking at the things that we have talked about, which areas do you think your board need to work on so that they can be able to perform better? Is it the area of relationships? Do you need to work on communication, for instance? Is it about responsibility? Making sure that everybody has their responsibilities very clear? Is it about authority? Or is it about accountability structures? And then the other question is, are there certain documents that you may need to actually work on so that can facilitate better governance in your organization? Assuming you're joining us as a Bible, so I believe that in terms of divine authority, you have the guide. But the question is, are you engaging with it every day so that you can actually be familiar with it? But then what about the letters of incorporation? What about the articles of incorporation, for instance? And what incorporation? What about constitution and bylaws? Do you have a board policies manual? Do you have management guidelines? And do you have a staff or a human resource handbook? Those are important questions that we need to ask ourselves and see whether we have the foundations set for good governance. Very quickly, there are three major roles, responsibilities of boards, and those roles are then can be subdivided further into various responsibilities. One of the most important things is to shape the mission and to provide strategic direction. Secondly is to make sure that there is leadership for the organization. especially at the management level, and to provide the necessary resources, both human and financial. And then thirdly, it is to be able to monitor and improve performance. I want to believe that any governance focuses on 3 areas will be very successful. Well, looking at those 3, we can identify further detailed responsibilities. For example, under shaping the mission and strategic direction, you can see that we are talking about asking pertinent questions on why does the organization exist, where is it going, what is its vision, and what are the values. I believe that every board should ask that question at least every quarter. If not at least once a year, you need to revisit that question. That needs to be in your agenda to figure out whether you are still on course, and to ensure that all the other decisions are based on your mission and vision. It's also very important for the board to engage actively in strategic decision making and policy decisions. Then when we talk about ensuring leadership and resources, it's the role of the board to select, to evaluate, develop, and support the CEO or the executive director. It's also the board's responsibility to ensure that there are adequate financial resources. So if the organization is under-resourced financially, the pressure needs to get to the board because that's their responsibility. It's also the responsibility to make sure that the organization has the right expertise and that they can be able to access the resources they need. But one of the things that constantly is forgotten by the board is that they are the ones who are responsible for enhancing the reputation of the organization. I remember reading a very interesting book that is based on a Chinese pub, and the title of the book is The Fish Rots from the Head. And it's basically saying that if the reputation of an organization is bad, then focus on the board and you will see the quality of board members. And the third key role is that one of monitoring and improving performance. And under this, we have certain responsibilities, such as overseeing financial and risk management, monitoring performance and ensuring accountability, improving the performance of the board itself, and making sure that all the legal requirements of the organizations are fulfilled. That is a responsibility of the board. What are some of the common board issues that we face? I basically have 4 of them, but there could be more than this. One of them is where the board lacks understanding of their role, or the role of the board and the CEO is not very clear, or sometimes there's a conflict between the role of the chairperson and the role of the executive director. When all those relationships are not clearly defined in writing, there is a cause for trouble there. We constantly encourage to ensure that there is a job description for everybody. So there is a job description for the board, there is a job description for the committees, there is a job description for the chairperson of the board, the treasurer, the secretary, all those, making sure that everybody understands their role. Of course, certain things like orientation of the boards also help deal with this situation. Another common board issue is where I feel that they are volunteers, and so they don't engage with the organization. They only attend meetings, but they never seek to understand what the organization is about, what are the issues it's facing, and so they are not involved in active decision. because they don't understand the organization. You will agree with me that to make good decisions for an organization, you need to have a clear understanding of what the organization is, what it's involved in, and some of the issues it's facing, and some of the challenges that it's likely to face in the future. I've also seen a situation where we have unengaged board members. So they are there in the, but they are not in touch with the organization. And even among themselves, as a board, they are quite disengaged from one another. And that basically is also a major challenge. You must find a way of keeping your board members engaged. Whether you have times when they can come and meet the staff, or possibly engage with beneficiaries of the services, but they need to find a way of connecting with what the organization does. They need to be able to tell the story of the organization to other people without necessarily having to ask the staff to tell the story. Getting the board members engaged is a very important element of good governance. The other common board issue that we find is where we allow the unacceptable, where people can attend meetings when they want, and sometimes they can fail to attend several meetings, and there are no consequences to that. So it becomes very important to have a very clear guideline of how many meetings somebody can miss. And possibly if they are not able to come for some reason or the other, provide room for someone else to be able to take up their role. So we should be able to have certain elements that are acceptable as far as board governance is concerned. So let me again pause for a moment and ask you this question. Are there any roles or responsibilities that need to be clarified for your board so that you can be more effective in your governance? If you are to evaluate your board, how would you rate them in terms of the 3 key roles that we have identified? And how would you rate them in terms of the 10 detailed responsibilities? It might be very helpful at the end of each year for you as a board to look at those 10 responsibilities and judge yourself how you have been able to do each of those responsibilities well. And that is a good exercise, especially when you talk about board development. Well, let's turn over to establishing and maintaining a board. And as you can look at that particular slide, there are a couple of things that are very important for you to clarify. First of all is to make sure that the mission and the role of the board members is clarified. Before you even think of bringing people on board, you need to be sure why the organization is. What are you trying to establish? And what do you want to accomplish? And then also very importantly, what do you need? Do you need a board that is involved in terms of finances and all that? We do have different types of boards that are, so you need to be very clear what type of a board, so that when you are recruiting people, you're able to clearly tell them what is expected of them. I remember a story of a friend of mine who told me how he is together in a board for a company that he had established. Because the terms were not very clear, at some point they almost threw him out of the company himself. And this brought a lot of conflicts among themselves. And this is simply because there was lack of role clarity from the word go. it's also very important to establish the responsibility of the individual board members and the composition of the board. And in this case, I'm talking about what size of board do you need? Are you looking at 2 or 3 advisors, or are you looking at 5 or 10 people? What will be the role of the CEO or the executive director? Are they part of the board or are they not part of the board? What are their terms of service? Do they serve for unlimited periods of times? Or do you have limited period that they can only serve for? These are very important to make sure that you clarify this before you bring people on board as board members. It's also very important for you to invest in recruitment and development. And so having a very clear process of how you recruit people into the board. Are there certain interests that you may want to be represented? Are there certain skills that you are interested? What is the matrix mix? And so that you make sure that you bring in all these relevant skills that are necessary to help you think strategically. How do you select? Do you want to make sure that there is an equal number of women and men, or a certain number of gender represented? And how are you going to orient them? And how will you develop them? And then also make sure that it's very clear about the positions of the board. If there's a chairperson, if there's a treasurer, if there's a secretary, if there are different committees, all that is very helpful to clarify. And then finally, we also talk about the operations of the board. How many board meetings are going to be there, for example, in a year? Are there committees? What is the kind of relationship between the board and staff? How do you develop board members so that you can keep them abreast of what's happening within the industry? And do you have certain policies like the conflict of interest or confidentiality policies? Do you have a board manual? All those are important documents that will help you to make sure that you have an effective board of governance. And just to give you an idea, the next slide really is just an example of a matrix mix. How you want to make sure that you have people from different occupations, professional experiences, social networks, different skills, abilities and experiences. And sometimes, depending on the organization, you may talk about race, religion, gender, and age. Now, this is just an indication. You can use this and expand it depending on the type of an organization you are. And so, when we talk about board development, I looked at it more from a circular illustration that clearly says that the first point is for you to identify the kind of a board that you want, the people that you think would meet the caliber of board members for the organization and the mission and the purpose for which it exists. Then you start cultivating relationship so that they can understand why you exist and understand what the organization is trying to be. Once they are convinced or they are brought into the picture, then is the time for you to recruit them. And then you continue now to orient them so that you can have them in the organization in depth. And then once they are oriented, it's time to involve them. And involve them, of course, in meetings, it's in programs of the organization, and different ways that you can let them be part and parcel of that organization. Of course, continuous education is very important. You constantly have to think of how you will keep on educating your board. There are different practices that are there. For example, there are some organizations that will do at least one retreat every year. And they decide maybe one day is just training on issues that are relevant to board members. It's important that you evaluate the board members so that you can be sure they are contributing to the mission and vision of the organization, and that they're adding value at the end of the day. And then once that is done, you have to rotate them, and that means you provide time for some to leave the organization so that you can bring in others into the organization. And that is what ensures vitality. I've seen so many great organizations that maintain the same bus for a long time, and so they never get to enjoy the interest of new ideas that are very relevant, that are important. So that to me is how to keep on developing the board, and this will help you to continue from where you are to where you want to be. And when all that is done, always remember to celebrate, because it's very important for the board to come together and celebrate what they're doing. Well, having said all that, I want to just share with you six board best practices. And one of them is on management and leadership, that the best boards continuously review their performance and to ensure that they are effective. And they also ensure that they have a strong working relationship with the executive director. And that can be done in different ways. And of course, that would be a conversation for another day. Another best board practice is to be conscious of legal responsibilities. You need to know the laws and policies of the country where you are registered, and ensure as a board that you comply. I'm sure if you have looked at, for example, the International Accounting Standard, at the beginning of the audited report, it talks about the board members, not the management. So compliance is a responsibility of the board. Third practice, best practice, is financial practices, is to ensure that they are external auditors. And we can talk about how often this should be changed. There are different practices for that. It's also important for board members to ensure sustainable resources by approving budgets and receiving reports of the progress, especially on the budgets and expenditures. But for non-profits, it's also a responsibility of the boards to ensure fundraising, which is very critical. Another best practice is about meeting practices. And this is ensuring that there are frequent meetings and that each meeting is documented. So we have good records of decisions that were made and the presentations that were made. And there is constant follow-up for everybody to fulfill their obligation. Also, good board practice requires for you to have core policies. And I've mentioned some of them earlier on, like the conflict of interests, some are whistleblower, and many others, core policies that are important. And then the sixth one is what we call the core leadership practices, which is about how you plan to keep the board revitalized. And like I said, either through seminars or workshops, all different ways of training like webinars, how the board will always ensure they are independent, they focus on results, and ensure that there is a culture of transparency, consistency, and accountability. But very important under core leadership practices is to make sure that you are strategic in your thinking and staying focused on your mission. These are very critical board practices. And so as we conclude, I just want to ask you, can you find 3 things that you can do to move your board forward from where it is to where you'd want it to be? That's a question that I would throw to you, especially in view of the many things I've talked about this. Then I would just give you a couple of books that I would recommend for you to have a look at. All these are very interesting readings on board governance, but the one in the middle by John Carr, Boards That Make a Difference, would make an interesting reading, as well as the one by Jim Brown. So I would want to stop there so that I allow room for a few questions, and I'll be more than happy to engage with this offline on any other conversation you might want because of the limitation of time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Barine. That was really very helpful. You're very thoughtful and you have presented very good ideas, and I'm sure our audience have taken notes, and I'll send you a copy of this presentation as well. Now, I was in Zimbabwe just last week, and I have a question. He said, I'm just a single proprietor. I'm not a big publishing house. Should I still form a board? That was his question. I was inviting him to join this webinar, and he said, I'm just a small, struggling Christian publishing house, and I may not need a board. What do you say, Barine?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. As a matter of fact, your last statement, where the person who asked the question said that he's a struggling publisher, is the reason why he needs a board. But then he needs to define the kind of a board that he needs. He and people will be more advisors than a hands-on board. So they will be involved in guiding him and helping him think strategically, but knowing that the legal responsibilities are basically will help him to move to this level.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you too for your encouragement. And Pastor Ronald Molmisa has a question. Any tips on how to compensate board members? Should we give any remuneration to the board, or they coming in there know that they are sharing these without expecting anything from the management? Barine?
Thank you. This is a question that, this is a question that I have had in many presentations, and I'm sorry to say that there is straight yes or no answer. Because especially for non-profits, it's important if you can get people who are convicted because of the mission of the organization. And so they are willing to give their expertise because they believe in that of the mission. That would really be the ideal situation. But there are situations that sometimes, depending on the different practices in different countries, for example, I've been to countries where at least board members are refunded their transportation costs. that sometimes makes sense if that is a practice. So I would say that the practices need to be guided by several factors. One is the kind of environment the organization is operating in, but also the kind of people that you want to bring on board. If you bring in people who believe in the mission and of the organization, more often than not, they are willing to give their time, because that is part of fundraising anyway. So I think I wouldn't want to say so much on this, but I would be happy to engage with this with Ronald, even on email, and I can share with him more of best practices and some of
Yes. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I see some of you are typing in your questions. Okay, it's good to engage our participants. So thank you that you are sending in your questions. Okay, so we'll wait for your questions to come in. Give them books if you're a publishing house. Your board members, you can send them your books, like free copies maybe.
sure.
Right. Dan, thank you for your encouraging comments. This is really excellent presentation. Oh, Dan is the chairperson of the MAI board. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yes, yes. Who else? Any more comments from our participants?
And just to add this, I mentioned of board evaluation or different policies that exist. If you want me to share with you some templates, I'm more than happy that just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you for even sharing your templates, Baride.
Oh.
There is a question from Inge.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a difference between a full governing board and a small committee working within a church which has its own legal board of trustees? Okay, a full board and a committee within the legal board of trustees. Okay.
Yes, there is a big difference, and that is why I say important that all the responsibilities of each committee or subcommittee need to be documented, so that it's very clear what the full governing board is supposed to do, and what the small committee is supposed to do, and what the relationships are like, so that if in any case there is a conflict, then we have a backup where we can go and say, maybe the small committee has already gone beyond its mandate.
Mm-hmm.
So all these is sorted out when everything is documented and the relationships are clarified. Okay. So what I tell many organizations is, when you have either a standing committee, make sure that it's clearly documented what is expected of them and where their mandate begins and where it ends. Okay. That helps really to avoid any conflicts.
Yes.
And even when a board has maybe a committee which is just to deal with a certain issue, it's good that it's documented in the board meeting, mm-hmm, why they were appointed, what is expected of them, okay, and when their mandate ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dan, thank you. You've asked for the templates for board evaluation, and yeah, I'm sure Barine will be happy to share that with you. Bernice, sure. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your affirmation and your encouragement. Okay, Bernice is also asking for the templates. In your graphic on board governance, missed what is meant by moral owners and what is PL and moral owners.
Okay, I just need to quickly go to that slide and.
Okay. It's here. Yeah. Moral owners and the PL.
Okay. What you find is that there are organizations that do not necessarily have membership. And I will just possibly give an example. Just this afternoon, I was in a conference where we were talking about Bible societies. And the question is, who owns Bible societies? And someone said it's churches. So the question is, who is the church? So that's what you describe as a moral owner, because you cannot possibly identify who they are. We know somebody owns them, but you cannot point out and say it's Ramon or it's Barine who owns this organization. That's the whole concept of moral owners. Well, when it comes to PL, we are talking about leadership that is, it's not. I'm looking for the right word. Where you are dealing with leadership that has been given some mandate. So the management really it forms the leadership of the organization, but they draw that authority from the board.
Okay.
So it's a leadership that exercises it's actually delegated leadership. So it's not P, it's actually a D. I'm sorry about that.
D. Should be delegated?
Yeah, it's delegated leadership. Yeah.
Okay. Delegated leadership. Okay.
My apologies about that.
Should be DL, not PL. Okay. So Pastor Ronald he sent his email address. Okay. So yeah, this has been very helpful. Any more questions from our audience? I think they're all appreciative of your presentation, Marine, and I think they also would like to get a copy of your template, especially for board evaluation. Okay, we'll get that to you, and I also will share this PowerPoint presentation to all of those who registered. So, yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. I would like to invite you to our next webinar. The title is Creativity is Not Magic. You can become more creative. Yes, you. And this will be led by Randy Kapp, the Design and Communications Consultant for the Bible Society of Egypt. It will be on May 10th, next month, May 10th, 2017, and register at litworld.org. Speaking of Egypt, our hearts go out to the families who have lost their loved ones in the recent bombing of the 2 Coptic churches in Egypt. Sabri, we are praying for you. We're praying for your country. And we are sad to see this attack on the Christians in Egypt. And we'll be thinking of you and praying for our brothers and sisters in Egypt. Of course, our big event next year will be Lit World 2018. So Bernice, you're here. Bernice and her team did a wonderful job at Lit World 2015, and because they did a very good job, we asked them to host the next Lit World. So next Lit World is 2018, October 28 to November 2, and it will be in Singapore. So mark your calendars, and we hope that you will be able to join us in this wonderful celebration of gathering Christian writers, editors, and publishers from around the world. And Bernice is already welcoming us. Thank you. I think Peter has a question. Um, Working alone, I have a steering committee of 3 mature Christians not yet developed into a board. Any comment? So he is working alone. He has a steering committee of 3. What would you comment? What would you recommend, Rine?
Thank you, Peter. That's a very valid question and a good one for that. I think going back to our definition of the board governance, there is a clear misconception of what a board is. Because I think you're already telling us you have a board.
Not yet developed.
It's just that you don't call them that way.
Oh, yes. So
Oh, you have a steering committee
of 3. Yeah.
So in my view, that's already a board.
Okay.
Just that you need to define what you expect of them,
Okay.
what their role is,
Okay.
and what their limits are.
Mhm.
And I believe that is the best way to begin.
Mhm.
And then you can go in the process of orienting them and helping them to understand what you're about to achieve.
I see.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, very welcome. Yes, very helpful indeed. So, thank you so much. We really appreciate your participation. It has been an engaging webinar. We hope you were not yawning while participating, and we hope that you will practice and put to use the learnings that you have gained from this presentation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month. And see you at Lit World. And share this presentation to your colleagues. God bless you, and see you again next time. Bye-bye for now. What do you say? How do you say bye-bye in
Kwaheri.
Kwaheri? Which means in
Swahili.
Swahili, goodbye. Okay. Bye.